Well, in Goa, I got involved in animal work somewhere in 1996 when actually one of these so-called animal lovers came to me saying that, look, there are stray dogs being, shot on the road. There was a policy in Goa which they say dates from the Portuguese time. There were the dog shooters and they were paid to shoot dogs and they would get money as per the number of tails that they gave to the authorities. The difference between Goa and other places was that the municipal workers didn't do it. It was farmed out to dog shooters. Whereas in Kerala, the municipality goes around and either kills the dogs or shoots the dogs or whatever. They don't commission this work. In Bombay, like they have these chaps who catch rats. They go out at night into the sewers and they catch rats, those big bandicoots and so on. And there also they're paid by the tails. Yeah, there is that system. So apparently tails, because I suppose you can't grow two tails. Every dog has only one tail. So anyway, there was this practice. And the thing was that there were shooting of dogs going on. And anyway, this young woman, she wanted to do something about animal, rights and so on. And I was also interested in the subject. And then we set up this organization, this NGO called People for Animals. There again, there were two things that, dog shooting was one aspect. But there was this practice of bullfights. The people who organize the fights and the people who watch the fights insist that it is not cruel
and
because they love their animals and they feed them so well and they treat them so well and then they put them up to fight and that the animals willingly, so to speak, fight or whatever. Well, I have always given the example of things like, say, slavery. You see, you might, at one time, slavery was accepted, that a person could have slaves. And you could have a favorite slave and you could treat them very well. And you could feed them and they would be very beautiful women and they would, do your bidding and so on and so forth. But there comes a time when society's thinking progresses and we recognize that no human being should be forced to be a slave unto the other. That there is a concept of freedom which is an endowment of every human being. And that no matter how well you may treat the person, that does not compensate for the fact that you take away their freedom altogether, which is the most basic right of every human being in order to be qualified as a human being. If you are not free, you are not allowed to be a human being. You are a thing. You are a property. At one time, wives are considered as also property, but society evolves and grows and so on. And so my answer to those who say that, well, we treat the bulls well, is that, well, if the law says that you cannot do certain things, then no matter how well you treat them, that does not compensate for the fact that you can break the law. And one of the things in the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, which dates from 1960, a little older than the Environment Law, is that no person can organize fights between two animals. You cannot organize a fight. So it does not matter whether you treat the animals well or you don't treat the animals well. It does not matter whether the animals normally fight with each other. It does not matter whether a snake and a mongoose will fight and the snake will kill the mongoose eventually. It does not matter that tigers normally eat goats and so they will kill the goats eventually. The fact remains that you cannot have a sport or an event where you put two animals together and force them to fight. That is the law. Now, in Goa, bullfights were organized and they were regular Sunday fair. I will not say that the Goan public is a bloodthirsty public. I will not say that they want to see blood. But the fact of the matter is that the bulls were made to fight. A bull can size its opponent, and if it wanted to turn away from the arena, no, it was allowed, it had to fight because there is betting involved. These are all the stakes in bullfights. You see, there is betting, there is a vicarious pleasure got by seeing one fellow stamp the other or in some way injure the other. It's a kind of, you like to see this fellow losing, this fellow winning. You bet. There's a whole excitement generated. And I cannot have an objection if there are two human beings who are boxing or fighting because they are willingly boxing and fighting. And if one fellow doesn't mind his head being broken, well, that's his problem.
He has a choice.
He has a choice. He can get out of it. He can do whatever he wants. At least theoretically, he has a choice. Maybe out of poverty, he has no choice. That's a different issue. But theoretically, he has a choice. But in the case of the bulls, or in the case of any two animals like cockfights or whatever, where their master is a person, it's akin to a slave relationship, a slave-master relationship, where you feed, you groom, you whatever, and then you put the animal and the animal is forced to be your bidding. Now, whether it is right or wrong, the fact is that the law says you cannot do it. And I saw it also, not just as an enforcement of the law, but I also saw that there was cruelty to the animals. Of course, it is their word against my word. So in a situation like this, I have taken recourse to the law and said that the law does not allow it. You cannot organize the fight. If there is a bullfight happening on the field, in the paddy fields, you can watch it. I don't say don't watch it. But when the animal recognizes that its opponent is stronger, it will turn tail and run, and that's the end of your show. Whereas in a bullfight arena, there's a pace at which must be maintained until you're down and down and down to the count of 10 or whatever count it is. You have to keep on the fight and so on. So I took the bullfights issue to the court. There was no preliminary preparation for it, to be honest with you. It just so happened that there were some heavyweight bull owners. They are the real bulls of the show, I would say. There was a heavyweight guys who were organizing a bullfight, major one, all days on Gandhi Jayanti. It was being organized on the 2nd of October in 1997, I think is the year. And at that time, the newspapers used to advertise these and, there was a lot of, so the bettings were high and so on. So in a very quickly drafted petition, incidentally, I got another lawyer to represent me because I was the petitioner at that time. We went to the court and we actually asked that, we pointed out that bullfights are illegal. And we said that of all the things, you cannot have it on Ahimsa Day, on a day of the father of the nation, which is non-violence. October 2nd is a sacrosanct day in the country's history and so on. So we asked for a stoppage on October 2nd. And the court said, why only October 2nd? Is it legal on other days? And it brought an immediate stay on bullfights. So the bull owners were taken by total surprise. And the public was taken by total surprise. And you can say that maybe the public was not educated as to why bullfights are against the law and why they are being stopped. So the court granted a stay. Then they heard us. The bull owner associations were joined. But they had no case in law. They argued that this is an age-old tradition. We have been doing it for years. Well, you may be doing it for years. But doing something for years does not make it right. And doing something for years can also be amended in terms of new thinking. And that's why I give the example of slavery. Slavery was legitimate for centuries. But there is a time when slavery becomes illegal. And no matter how well you treat the bulls, it is still an illegal activity if you put them to fight. I have no objection in you looking after them the way you want. You can look after them whatever way. But you cannot put them to fight. The judgment was in December of, I think, 1997. The bull owners took the matter to the Supreme Court. The petition was admitted and dismissed on the same day. It was the fastest case that was ever handled. The whole thing was over in 6 months. Unfortunately, for the public, it is the politicians in Goa who have been continually promising the public that they will amend the law. That they will change it and that at the next assembly and the next elections they will do so.
But is that possible?
It is not possible because the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act is a central statute. You got to get it amended at the center. And Goan politicians do not have a hold at the center. There is a Ministry of Environment and Forests They can amend the law, they can change the law, they can look at the law or whatever. But you cannot promise the public that I will amend it and that we politicians in Goa will do something about it, because it's not in your hands. It's not your law. It's a central statute which says that putting animals together to fight is against the law. On that score, you just don't have a case. There's no way, because you cannot argue that you are not putting the animals to fight and that they are fighting on their own, because you're putting them in an arena and you are watching them around it. So irrespective of any other argument that I had raised, which is that animals are goaded, the stick is put in their anus sometimes, there are sharp-edged instruments used to nick them on the thighs and so on, which force them to fight and so on, and that they are forced. Apart from all those arguments, the fact remains that per se, if you deliberately bring two animals there and put them in a place, it is against the law. So maybe I am out of sync with what the public wants. But in this case, it is again the law which must prevail. And I think the public needs to understand this whole concept of animal rights, because animal rights is not something which the public understands. They don't easily understand why animals need to be given rights, why they cannot be butchered and killed and slaughtered as may be desired by human society. And this takes me to the issue of the stray dogs. Now, the stray dogs is a more sort of touchy ground because, see, bullfights, question of entertainment. There was no purpose served.
It's a bit of a luxury, and it's also geographically restricted, maybe to Salsette, Swadi country.
Yes, restricted in Goa. There are no bullfights in other states. You don't have. They may have other fights. They may have some cock fights, or they may have something else, but they don't have bullfights. So it's Goa and it's entertainment. There is no value which is got out of it. You cannot say that by having bullfights it promotes so and so cause. It's just your entertainment. Okay. On stray dogs, the ground shifts slightly because, one, there are large number of stray dogs. There is an excess of stray animals, stray dogs, because of multiplication and sort of procreation. Two, there is the fact that there is nobody who owns them, that's why they are stray, and they move around public places, and dogs can bite. They can bite, and you do not know when they will bite. They can also intimidate, because it's an animal which has an ability to harm you in some manner. Even if you see a bull, it's got horns, and you would be wary of where you went. If you saw a snake, you would be wary. If you saw a fox, you would be wary. You'd be wary. You might not be wary of sparrows, that's about it. But otherwise, you would be wary of an animal. If a pig has got its piglings with it, you will be wary because, every animal protects itself. But in dogs, there is the fact that they can bite. There is also the fact that if the animal has the rabies infection in it, it can pass it on to humans, and rabies is fatal, which is fatal. So we are on a sort of totally different ground here, because this is not a question of entertainment. This is not a luxury. This is a question of the existence of certain animals posing a threat to human beings who can be affected by them. So where does the question of animal rights come? Now the issue becomes, do stray dogs have a right to exist, or must they all be killed because they may bite and because they carry the possibility of rabies threat to human beings?
At one level, these are all very philosophical issues, and it really depends on what you believe in and how you see the world. So, I think, it's one worldview clashing against another world.
It's very much that. It's whether human beings are willing to be tolerant enough to see that they are part of the entire setup, or whether they still believe that they are at the apex and that everything must serve them. I am not of that view. I am of the view that we are part of the whole thing, and that we have to also restrict our growth. We cannot take every bit of land and build it for ourselves, set up our mega cities, go on with our progress and our development, cut down forests, because where will those animals go? You are having today in Goa, for example, elephants rampaging the fields. So, Where have they sprung up from the fields? No, they have come from areas because you have removed their habitat. You have taken their land away because you didn't think that they were important enough. So at one point they find their stocks of food are less, and so they come down and plunder the plains, and so on. So it's a question of human beings finally deciding that, okay, there is this much that we can do, and here is where we have to draw the line.
Or even a whole lot of wildlife coming down to village areas in places where there are industrial estates set up, and suddenly you're seeing peacocks and things like that, which is also an indication that something is going wrong somewhere. And
it's a wildlife. People like the Save the Tiger campaign, say for example. Now, Save the Tiger is because the tiger is at the apex of the chain, so to speak. If the tiger is there, it means that there are deer. If the deer is there, it means that there are grasslands. If the grasslands is there, it means that there are insects and frogs and whatever. If the tiger is not there, it means that the food chain, something has gone wrong. So in the end, it means that the environment has got destabilized. So why when we save the tiger, we can't save the tiger in the cage. If we put the tiger in the cage, we can save all the tigers, capture them all, put them in cages, and all the tigers are there for you. But when we say save the tiger, we are saying save the tiger because it means we are saving a whole system which ensures that you got tiger at the very end.
So what's your position and how do you all defend it?
So my position is simply this. As I said, according to me, animals have a right to exist. Alright? And stray dogs are a problem. Yes, I admit that there is a problem that they cause and they are a threat to people. So the only way is to deal with the problem in a manner which keeps our values intact as well. Incidentally, the law, according to me and according to my interpretation of the law, I am backed by the law, but it's a debatable issue because I have read the law, and according to the law, you cannot simply eliminate stray dogs in this manner.
Which act?
Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, Section 11(1) says that you cannot eliminate including stray dogs. The words are there in the act. Including stray dogs by cruel means and so on. At the same time, there is the fact of this rabies problem. So, according to me, what is the solution? The solution is to control the population of stray dogs, to see that the stray dog population is reduced, and to see that the threat of rabies is curtailed or removed. For the past 7 years, say, I have been working on this problem of doing a program, which is the central government's program, for sterilizing the strays and for giving the anti-rabies vaccinations to all the strays. I run 2 shelters. One is in Ponda and the other is in Marmagaon. There are 4 other animal welfare organizations, and there are, as a consequence of going to the court on the stray dogs issue and saying that you cannot simply eliminate stray dogs by shooting, poisoning, killing, etc., the court asked the Goa government, what are you going to do about this problem? And the answer of the Goa government was that we will follow the animal birth control program for stray dogs and we will implement it in the state of Goa. And there are 5 NGOs which are doing it in different areas of Goa. Now, unfortunately, not all areas are covered. And not all areas are covered because some municipalities do not see that there is a problem and they don't bother about this problem at all. And the NGOs reach is limited to the areas where they can handle their situation. But I believe that if you can reduce the stray dog numbers and if you can vaccinate them, which we are incidentally done, we have covered a total of 53,000 strays have been vaccinated against rabies and sterilized. Now that is something which is an achievement in the face of a problem where no dogs were vaccinated or sterilized. If in 5 years we have managed to reach 53,000, that is something to the credit of the groups who have done it. And no doubt there may be cases where dogs will bite. There may be cases of rabies still. But you can see a prognosis and you can see that this can be tackled and dealt with. And here is one area where the public is responsible for increasing the number of strays as well. Because how many of the public have sterilized their own pets so that the offspring of the pets do not become strays. No, the public does not bother. If there are pups, they take them and they put them in the marketplace.
Right.
And when they don't find them the next day, their conscience is very clear that, somebody took those pets home.
Yeah.
They take kittens and they put them in the fish market. So we are responsible for the problem. Government ought to have done much more than it has done. It has done nothing, in the sense that it sits down, veterinary officers stay in their cabins in the veterinary departments and expect the public to bring the dogs to them for anti-rabies vaccination. But you tell me, if you don't have a vehicle, how are you going to take your dog to a veterinary center for vaccination? Are you going to walk the dog to the place? So what the NGOs have done is, we go village to village, house to house, or at least street by street, saying, please bring your pup out, whatever category you have got, ordinary Gaunty dog, and we will vaccinate them. We have taken vaccination to the doorsteps of people. All the critics of our program must know that if we had not taken the vaccination, if the NGOs were not there, so many more 53,000 dogs would not be vaccinated, because they have never ever vaccinated their dogs. So in this manner, we are trying to see that the problem is dealt with. And if in places like Chennai, where they have had this animal birth control program for 20 years, they started in 1986. They have had the program for 20 years. They have found it successful. They say it is a rare sign if you can see a dog mating on the roads or you can see a pup. It's very, very rare. You cannot see it.
Birth rates have gone down.
Once the dogs are sterilized, they cannot produce another one, and they don't come in heat. So when they don't come in heat, the fighting is brought down. Of course, as I always tell my critics, it doesn't mean that the dogs, we cannot stop them from barking. That is not something that the ABC program can do anything about. We also cannot prevent them from chasing somebody. It is something that dogs do. I agree that they do them. I agree that there have been fatal accidents now and then. I agree that it is a problem. I agree it is a trauma. But there are many problems in society where the death rate is far higher. Take road accidents.
That's true.
Why you look at only rabies cases?
You don't get emotional about them.
Rabies cases maybe 5 or maybe 3 or maybe 7. Road accidents are 200 and something. Are you stopping cars?
That's true.
No. What you say is there, cars are useful for us, so even if they kill, we can drive them. But dogs are of no use to us. Dogs have no rights, so we will eliminate them.
Life should go on without us making any sacrifice in other words.
I think that this is completely skewed. You cannot, if you are worried about deaths, deal with the problems which are causing maximum deaths and then go downwards. Don't take a problem because that is a small guy. A stray dog is a small guy. He has no voice. He cannot fight you.
In a certain sense, I think NGOs also are pushed on the defensive. Every time they need to prove their bona fides, they need to prove their motives. That has been the dominant kind of trend that maybe you had to live with. Or as a green lawyer, were you anytime seen as, having malified intentions or not being even-handed?
Yes, in the beginning, there were always the allegations, sometimes even made in court, that it was at the behest of a particular rival party. So if we took up a case against one hotel, they would say that this is because North Goa hotels want to benefit, so they are trying to get at us at South. If we took up a case in North Goa, one hotel, they would say their rival is going to set up something. So these allegations were there. And sometimes there were also telephone calls from the parties whose constructions we had challenged. They would make a telephone call saying that we would like to come and see you and explain our position. But we were always very clear that we never met a party who we had taken to court. We did not want to hear their explanation because we said once we have filed a case, all your explanations are to be given directly in the court. And I think after about 4 or 5 years, this allegation, personally, I have not faced it. People have asked sometimes, have you been intimidated? Have you been threatened? Have you worried about yourself? And so on. Well, the only time there was some intimidation was in the bullfights case. When after the case was over, the government actually sent police for some protection to me, or rather the telephone, because the South Goa bull owners, they threatened to bring 1,000 bulls and put them outside my house or something like that. So the police had called up and said that, can we come and stay outside your house? And I told them, please don't come and stay outside my house. Nobody's going to bring bulls to my house. It's not possible to drive bulls all the way. But they said that, in case there's any problem, please telephone us. That's the only time that I did not know of the threat, but the government anticipated that there may be some problem, and they said, but nothing of course happened. But otherwise, I think the message eventually went that, okay, these people or this lawyer, they are not negotiable in this sense. We are negotiable in terms of if you have a better point, we are willing to modify. If we have put up a case which is not the right one, yes. It's not that we say that we are right. But we are not willing to negotiate, or we are not looking out to make a fast buck. It's not in anybody's behest and so on. And in one or two cases where I fought on behalf of people, like group of citizens who I don't know, but who have come, and it has been pointed out that somebody's husband owned a truck and so on, I have immediately told the court that drop the person as a petitioner, or let the person get their own counsel or whatever, because this is not about A or B or C. In one case, I remember one of the petitioners hid some facts, did not tell me that there was a private case, but I filed an affidavit saying that this is the cause that is before the court, and if this petitioner has misled the court, you can take whatever action. I have nothing against this issue. So proving bona fides, maybe in the beginning, yes, we didn't consciously attempt to prove bona fides, but there were these kind of allegations and there were these kind of things which came around.
I think because it's so hard in India still to understand the concept of, taking up a public cause or really working for public interest. As of now, we only understand one thing, that if he or she is doing something, they must be having some agenda. So what's the agenda in that sense? And maybe do you see this trend changing where people can actually, as we get better educated, as we get a bit more affluent, there are people who actually feel extremely strongly about this and are willing to devote their life or part of their life towards cause?
I think so. I see that there are people who do realize that there is a limit to how much you need to earn and how much you need to bother about your own, your private self. And I don't say this in a negative manner, in the sense of course, all of us need to have a source of living, and we need to take care of our families, and we need to ensure that we know certain basic things we have. But we do realize that at some point, unless we start thinking about the area where we live, all the personal gains that we might have, all the level of affluence that we might reach, or the comforts that we might have might not be there to enjoy if you don't have good air, if you don't have good water. What is the point? And how many of us are willing to flee the country and go to some other country where it has its problems of its own?
Or maybe to Mars also one day.
Yeah. So many people feel, okay, if we have dug in our heels and we are going to be here, then let us put a stake in protecting the area around. I see it increasing. You are right. I see it increasing. I see there are citizens who say that, okay, I've done this much, I've got this much, I will continue my work in this manner, but I will devote myself to seeing that things around me are also not disintegrating. So what was Goan Society saying? Goan Society was saying that we have to restrict our own freedoms. We have to put limits to what we can do. We can do this much. But when we can do this much, and when we can have casinos, and when we can have gambling dens, and when we can have so many things, we realize that these are the consequences that will fall on us. So let us decide to limit what we will do. This is going back to the animal rights and environment question. We can destroy all the forests. Who stops us from destroying all the forests? We can put up our mega cities wherever we want. But in the end, it will boomerang. So let's decide that we will not expand. We will give the environment its place, and with it, we will give the animals their place also. That's how the situation. Finally, Rico, we have to see that we are the people who can bring about our destruction. We can destroy ourselves by our own freedoms, by our own adventurism. We will destroy ourselves. We don't need somebody to come and destroy us.
The enemy is not out.
If we don't realize that we are not at the apex, that we are one in the system, and that if we want to survive, we make sure that the man next to us survives. There was that poem, First they came for the Jews and I did
right.
not stand up, and then they came for the communists and I did not stand. Finally, there was no one left to stand up for me. Right. So if I want to be alive and I want my children to have a good time, I make sure that your environment is protected as much as mine is.
Right.
Because if yours is protected, mine is also. That's sort of how I look at this whole question of environment and animal rights put together.
Coming back to a very interesting story that I've heard a little of in the past, and that was how you all moved down to Goa and how you left a big city and came here and learned new lessons while you were here. I think that somehow makes a setting for what you are today and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, well, that's going back to the beginning, though not the real beginning. Anyway, as I said, I lived 24 years of my life in Bombay City.
Which parts of it?
I lived in Mahim. Ordinary middle-class family. My mother was a teacher in a school. My father worked in a company. And I went to the regular convent school in the area. A good school, but not chosen as, in any particular way. It was a school where everybody went to. Right. And, well, I was academically at the top of my class. In that sense, I was ambitious, I think. I have to admit that I was not this easygoing, laid back, take life as it comes. No, I wanted to achieve what I wanted, and I always, I think, wanted to be the best in whatever I did. Okay, so I was academically good. I finished my studies. I went to college, and I went to Sophia College. It was a girls' college.
And what were your dreams as a kid in that time?
My dreams as a kid were I always wanted to teach. Something inborn, I think, in me. Maybe it's inherited from my mother, who was a good teacher. I don't know. I still remember saying this, even if I am paid 2 paisa, at that time there was something called pice. If I'm paid 2 paisa, I will teach. So I was very firm that I wanted to teach. It was something I enjoyed. And sometimes I think even in the courts, maybe I'm teaching. Because I say it because I think one talent that I have is of mentally having a picture which I can put across to somebody else. I always feel if I know something, I am confident that I can explain it to somebody else. Some people have a difficulty in explaining what they want to say, explaining the point.
They know it in their mind, but they can't get it across. So.
But I can get examples, I can break it up, I can put it in a manner in which it is logical and somebody can continue. And I'm not hasty to jump to the conclusion before you've understood the beginnings. So anyway, I did college, the regular college for my BA was in history major. Politics was my subsidiary. Then my MA was in history. And I remember among the options open to history, one was law, would have been law. One was foreign service or Indian administrative service. And you could teach also. And I just turned down any possibilities of my constitutional law teacher. I had taken constitutional law, incidentally. My constitutional law teacher was suggesting to me at that time, why don't you examine being a lawyer? And I said, no way, I want to teach. And so I finished my studies. I did my MA. And then I started doing my doctorate. But while I was doing my MA itself, I got a job in the college in which I taught. Because I had a first class and so on, so I could take college lectures. So I started teaching right from 71, right up till 77 when I got married. I was lecturing in Sophia College. For some time I was teaching in a school also. I was lecturing in history, and constitutional law was the paper that I also taught at one time. And I finished my studies, also taught. Then, I had been friendly with a person I eventually married. I was with college friends and we got married.
Were you environmentalist at that stage, or was Claude more deeper into it?
No, I was not an environmentalist at all. Environment was not an aspect. I was interested in history. I was interested in the past. All the books that I read were on history. I was I read all Will Durant's volumes and so on. And I was interested in academics. I was not interested. That's why I say, I was not this animal lover, because my whole world was in books.
It was an urban world also.
It was an urban world. And my entire life, the parameters of my life was the walls of academic institutions. I was comfortable. I was happy there. I could have spent my entire life in that area. I was a good researcher. I would have been very diligent. I would have pursued It's what I was good at. It's what I wanted to do. And it's a career which I can see I would have sort of, ended up being maybe principal of some college and, gone up in the in the strict academic world, because I was very happy there and I didn't see a world outside of it.
So then the decision to shift to Goa, how did that
Okay, the decision to shift to Goa occurred because, my Claude, whom I married, he was also in academics, but he had gone to Holland, done his PhD there, and got interested in this alternative technology. I think that's what it was called, alternative technologies. And we had to decide when we got married, where we were going to stay. Now, Bombay was our home. Yeah. He was from Bombay, I was from Bombay. But there is one thing that I must tell you, one incident which occurred. Sometime as part of college education, I was exposed to the fact that there is a world which is not of the privileged world. I got exposed to that. The church at that time was looking at social issues, and they were introducing us young students, young middle class people, to things that had happened in India,
like the
outside our homes.
The drought and things like that.
Like the drought, when there were floods, there was a big Koina earthquake. So we were all taken. We went on camps.
I see.
These camps were great fun because a whole bunch of, 100 students together, boys and girls, can have fun. But we were shown that there are people who live in these houses and these hutments, and not shown in the sense of not voyeuristic, but we went to help.
And at that stage when you're young, it really hits you.
It impressions. You are impressionable. I remember many of my colleagues who didn't take part in these things, they would say, are you going to go and build roads for them? No, we were building roads, we were helping carrying mud, but they were things that were out of our normal life. They were things we never did. We never saw countryside otherwise, but we went to small homes where we saw women with so many children, and we would interview them, and they would tell us how they didn't get milk and how their husbands had been beaten up, and the liquor problems and all these kind of things. And we would have these camps for short spells of time. And all through my college years, I participated in every single camp. I went to all the camps, and I, liked it, and I used to do that. But it was making an impression on my mind as well. I didn't realize it was, but I remember one camp which we had gone to, and this was in Delhi, and it was a seminar, it was a workshop actually, where we were looking at the whole scenario of India from the political side and the ethical side, the economic, all we were in groups and we had to prepare papers. And I was in one of the groups which was preparing a paper on one of the aspects and so on. And all of a sudden at that meeting, I still remember, it sort of hit me that, look, I can remain in this place where I am with my dreams of teaching, and forever I'll have a good job. I'll teach kids of families who can afford it, and I can do this, and it is honorable work. But there is some people somewhere who are not getting any benefit of this reaching down to them. It was something that hit me. It was very idealistic. I didn't know what to do about it, but it was a seed which had got planted in my head, and it never went away. It started growing. And along with Claude, well, he was a little more radical, I would say, far more radical than me in that sense. But we used to discuss, there was Marxism was there, it was on the campus. You're talking about the summer of 69 and the student revolutions and all this kind of thing. These were things which were impacting. And our discussions, I remember, were on these topics. We would be arguing in the canteens and so on over it. As we got friendly and so on, we sort of not made a pact, but we had decided that we would move out of this privileged setup and we would go to some place where we could reach to another set of people, where we could take the fruits of what we had learnt and give it to somebody else who would not. Now, this is again a top-down approach. So we were looking at ourselves as privileged and reaching to somebody else. And in this context, when we got married, our first decision, which we had decided even before we got married, was we will get out of Bombay. Immediate.
I see.
In the sense of, we had a couple of choices. There were some friends of ours who had set up something in Nasik, where they had wanted to, they were doing a rural development project and so on. But Claude was in Holland, had contact with some of the aid agencies over there. And there were some of our friends here. One is the noted cartoonist Alex.
I see.
Another lawyer, Peter.
Yeah.
They were college friends. They had already come to Goa because they had homes over here, and for whatever reason they had decided to come to Goa. So we decided we will come to Goa to work in the rural area. I left my job just like that. It was, you can say, one of the most reckless decisions I made. But we were confident that, we could earn a living. I think that was never a problem in our mind. How will we earn, find a way? Anyway, we left Bombay, we came to Goa, and we set up, along with a group of Goans, a rural development project which was called Rustic. It was standing for Rural Study and Transformation Center, the short form, the acronym.
And it was really rustic in the sense that it was away from Panjim and
it was completely away. It was in Valpoi, Thane, at the foothills of the Western Ghats there, right at the borders of between Belgaum and... So we got married. For about a year I lived in Kalangut, because we took up a rented place while we could figure out what we wanted to do. Then we bought some land in this area, and we lived in this village called Thane for 5 years, where 2 of my sons were born. Now for me it was a completely different life, and nobody thought I would stick it out for even a week, I think. But amazingly, I was happy there. I did not feel deprived. Sure, I did miss certain things in Bombay, like I was used to easy transport, trains in Bombay. I missed things like movies and various things like that. And Valpoi there was not a soul I could talk to, you could say,
really
in that
sense. I mean, in the 70s, even more so than now. Even more so than now. There was no TV, there was no electricity even. Then we got electricity.
But there was a group of people with whom we were working. We were all living together as a kind of commune, you can say, some sort of a commune. And we lived there. And this was the idea at that time. The idea was, as I told you, Claude had come back with these appropriate technology ideas. At that time, you had a little bit, the Green Revolution was had already taken off. And there was this idea of the crossbred animals improving the local stock and so on. So our scheme of things was this. We had this plot of land. It was a 40-acre farm which we bought for a low sum of something like 1 lakh on a grant given by Novib, which was an aid agency. They simply gave the money to buy the land. Now that land was bought, and we were going to use appropriate technology to raise a model farm, which would be a model for people in the surrounding area to replicate. And the earnings from that were going to run a school for underprivileged kids, which was already had been set up by one of our friends in Kalangut. This was the project, which we were working on assiduously and very devotedly for 5 years. But in the course of our running this project, we learnt that the technology was not entirely appropriate, and that there were many things that it said it would do, but it had not done. Like that the crossbred cows did not deliver exactly the amount of milk that you wanted them to deliver, and they were more prone to illnesses, and that the bank returns were not that much. And we found eventually that we could not generate enough income to run that school, which was the whole purpose of farming. And in the end, after those 5 years, we were telling people, please don't do what we have done. So we were actually saying that don't keep crossbred cows. They have these problems, they have this thing. Improve the local yield. Improve the local milch cow or whatever it is. But don't bring one from Bangalore, because what is good in Bangalore is not good in Goa. Climate is one of the main factors, and so on. Several things like that. We found that the veterinary services were not what they are. Because when banks give you a loan, because we had taken a loan for buying the cows and all that. And when you do a bank sheet, the bank says X number of cows at X amount of milk equals this much, sold at this much, gives you this much. This is the amount you can pay towards the loan.
It doesn't work in reality.
It doesn't work at all. Because it doesn't calculate that there will be hoof and mouth. It doesn't calculate that there will be milk fever. It doesn't calculate that the veterinary doctor will have gone home because he's the only man put in that veterinary center and nobody will come. It doesn't calculate that the amount of medicines that you pay and that the animal takes 7 days to recover from that and slowly starts the milk yield again. So it just did not work out. But in that 5 years, I will say that was my environment grounding. Because I was growing, literally, we were struggling to make ends meet. I won't say that I didn't have food because, well, I had my earnings, I had bank savings and so on. But if you look at running the farm, I realized what are the difficulties in growing rice? What are the difficulties in raising cattle? What are the problems when you grow cashew or tomato? How one illness can wipe out the entire crop. Till today, I cannot bargain in the markets because I know what it costs to grow kothmir. I cannot bargain when somebody sells me 5 rupees, even for the small bunch, I take it. Because I know what it costs to grow.
Which is a total different perspective which you have if you had been city bred or if you are sitting behind a government office. Or
it's a totally different perspective because
real life is hard in that. It's different.
You always feel that those people are lazy, uneducated, and that they while away their time, they drink and they don't do anything with themselves. But the kind of risks that they face are far more than what you and I would face in a city establishment. In the end, we were trying to show people that this modern technology, which was being touted as the way to improvement, had a lot of drawbacks which were not told, and we were sort of telling people in the end, don't do it our way. But the whole 5-year episode resulted in us deciding that this was not going to work. It was not going to make the money to run the projects that we wanted to do, which was a school for underprivileged kids and so on. What happened in that period is that I got my first-hand experience with environment in a very practical sense. Rice, coconut, whatever. And I saw how nature impacts, how there are certain things that you can't do anything about, and how the life in rural areas is not really easy. It is problems, and it's not that the people are stupid. It's not that they are uneducated in that sense. They are educated insofar as growing the rice crop is. They're very educated, whereas you and I, with my education, cannot grow rice because we don't know the exact season. They can read the clouds, they can see when rain's coming. But there are certain factors beyond their control. They cannot bring rain. They cannot do anything if there's a devastating pest which affects their entire crop. So they are not backward. So our ideas, which I was telling you earlier, that we would go to the rural areas to teach them, to train them, to, it was a kind of top-down thing. It began to also shake. It was not exactly that we had the answers and they didn't know that and we would teach. It was not that at all. There was something else. I got a first-hand view or knowledge or understanding of how they are dealt a bad deal two ways. One is that they are dealing with agriculture and nature effects and so on. And the second is that certain of the privileges that we take for granted, or certain of the rights that we take for granted, like simple things like ration cards, like applying for certain forms, like getting certain documents, like getting several things, are things that they are given the runaround, or that they just don't get. There are middlemen who stamp their cards and take their oil and sell it at a higher price and so on. Small things. And I felt that if I could do something for them by making applications, going to offices and doing it, I would be doing a service for the people. Now remember, at that time, I was planning to stay in that rural area where we were. And it is with this background that I decided to do law. Because I thought that if I am a lawyer and if I am qualified, then I can argue for them, because I saw that when we went to Mamlatdar's office, you needed to know the law. You didn't know under what you could get certain things. So my introduction to law. So a choice of career which I had rejected as being a professional choice, which I could make as a professional career, I chose. Eventually, I decided to study law only for this purpose. So my entire intention in studying law was just to see that I could help some people in some way. At the same time, I had still kept my PhD. I was doing my doctorate I was trying to do something on socio-economic conditions in 16th century or something like that. But at the end, when the Valpoi project did not work out and we were forced to eventually sell the farm, we also found that it was not what we wanted to do, because, as I said, we found that the appropriate technology was not appropriate. We decided to sell the farm. We came and bought a place in Para. My husband went into journalism, and I now had this choice open to me. Do I want to continue with my PhD and go into academics back again, which I could have done, or do I want to do something else? And that is where I made a decision. I closed the academic door and I said, okay, academics is not something. With the amount of practical experience and realism that I had, I just did not see myself fitting into a pure academic environment anymore. It had become unattractive, and I was no longer interested in getting a PhD on 16th century Goa and teaching history. And I thought I want to do something which is on a more active level. And I took my legal career instead. I completed my law degree, got my sanad and so on.
It was much more immediate. But at which year you completed your law? Because that was it came late, although you caught up very fast.
I did my law when I was expecting my third child. My final year law was, I remember I was expecting my third child, which is 1986. And even then, Rico, I had intended to do law. I had never intended to go up front in the court. I had not intended. Okay. That's why I told you. I believed that if I did law, I would understand the framework in which certain things are available. I would be able to argue with some official somewhere that these are things that were due to people, and I would know the nitty-gritty of getting around in a legal manner. That was my intention.
Yeah. You caught up very fast. Was it because of the passion that was involved with the issues, or the fact that you just didn't go through the usual route of training under a senior?
I didn't go. I never functioned under any senior. I didn't work the normal routes at all. For two reasons. One is, as I told you, I was not interested in a career in law. I was not interested in earning a living in law. I was not interested in knowing the law in that sense in order to take on cases from various people and run it as a job. I was interested, I had an objective which I wanted to satisfy. And I was very fortunate in that I knew and worked with, in a sense of getting information from and getting training at a sort of question-answer level. What should I do in this matter? That kind of training from the Lawyers Collective Indira Jaising in Bombay. She had come, she is a pro-social rights person in law, and she had done the pavement dwellers case and so on, and she had come to Goa at our request to handle our first case. Now, I had training in law at that time, but I had never been in a court, but I was helping her with documents and so on. And then after that, it was very difficult to get lawyers from Bombay. We also did not know too many lawyers in Goa who would handle it with this kind of competence, because we knew what we were up against. It's not a question of going to the court and being cowed down by somebody else. So finally, because we also didn't have the resources to fly them, to get the lawyers in, and they did their work pro bono for us at that time. Finally, the Goa Foundation, at one point we had a case together. So I studied it all and then looked at the case that we had prepared it accordingly and went to the court without any training at all, but knowing the facts and whatever I knew of the law on the tips of my fingers, so that I knew which page to turn to and where to go to. And as I said, I think it was my teaching skills which helped me, because I knew how to present the facts. I knew how to present the case, I knew how to present the law, and then I waited for the judge and he gave me the interim relief because it was sort of presented. So I learned on the way. My entire legal career, although people think that because I'm in Bombay, I'm trained in Bombay, I'm really not trained in Bombay in law. I've just learned en route, but I have put in a lot of effort. I have corrected drafts several times. I will not take a substandard draft of my own. I will revise, correct, sit late into the night and redo and, check it all out. And that is the kind of self-education, I would say. My whole legal expertise or whatever I have is a matter of just learning from mistakes that were made and knowing how to cover them up the next time or how to deal with them.